Today, we're making a gone hunting sign. So guys, we are really trying to build our channel, and this whole algorithm thing is kind of difficult. So do us a favor, click that subscribe button and the little bell icon so you get notified when we put out new videos. It's free, don't cost you anything, and it's almost Christmas. It's the giving time of year. So one of our most popular stencils is the Gone Fishing stencil. And one of you guys, and I cannot remember who it was, sent us an email saying you guys should make a Gone Hunting one. So that's what we're doing today. Mom put this design together, and I gotta say, I'm pretty excited to carve it. So guys, I'll leave a link in the description below for the Gone Hunting stencil, plus all the other stuff we use today. Let's get started. Using a stencil is by far the best way to lay out, in my opinion. It's fast, it makes a great looking sign, and you can always add more to it and customize it with a name or whatever, but sometimes they bow. That's why I'm using this little adhesive double stick tape, and that really helps to keep your stencil flat on the board. And the best thing about that, as opposed to say the spray adhesive, is that it comes off super easy, and most of the time you don't really have any issues with it sticking to the board. And if you do, you just use a little eraser and you're good. I started off with a profile bit at 1/8 of an inch deep. Now I could have used a carving liner on here, it probably would have been a little bit easier, but I always try to use the least amount of bits as possible on a sign. And I do that because I'm impatient and I hate switching routers or switching bits. So when I did these ducks, the wings are what you're really kind of a challenge on this. So I just lifted the router bit up so that way the end of the wings and even the beak right here, I just carved with the tip of the bit. So I still got a good sharp point to it, but I didn't have to change my router bit. For the deer antlers, I dropped the bit down to 3/16, so it wasn't a whole lot deeper, but I think it definitely made a difference when it comes to going back in with your 90 degree and taking out all of the background. There's still some small lines on the deer to carve, so even though my router bit is at 3/16, being able to control your depth and kind of find that mid-range is really important, and the best way to do that is to make sure you have as much flesh on the board as possible. So notice my forearms and my hands are either on the board or the table, and that allows you to have a lot more control of your router. The little grass areas have some sharp points too, but I left my router bit at 3/16 of an inch deep. Something like this, you don't have to get every single little point that's on the stencil or on the board. You just have to go for the basic shape of the artwork. Once all of the outline with my profile was done, I went back around the inside of the duck images to give myself a bigger line for a little bit more room to go in with my 90 degree. For all the wording on the stencil, I used the 60 degree bit at 3/16 of an inch deep. Now the top word, gone, was super easy. It's just real fat lines, so I went around one side and then made sure that line was straight. Then I went back around to hit the other side and get the remainder of the black out. Nice and simple. For the script font on the bottom word, there's a couple of areas where you have a little bit more of a sharp point, but it's not real bad at all. The 60 degree worked perfect for that. And also in the cursive areas where the lines connect, they get a little bit thin. But this is another time where being able to manipulate the router and raise it or tilt it or do whatever it is you need to do to get that thinner line. But you still want to make sure that it's thick enough to where you won't actually sand it out after you have it sprayed. So with a little bit of practice, this stencil is pretty simple. Then I used my 90 degree at 3/16 of an inch deep to go in and remove the rest of the wood that's in the 3 duck images and also the deer. Now, I forgot there's a couple parts in the deer antler where I couldn't get the 90 in there, so I just used my pocket knife and chipped them out. I had an idea of how I wanted this sign to look. Several years ago, my buddy took me duck hunting at his club, and there was this old building there that looks like nobody's touched it since the 60s, and I wanted this sign to look like something that would hang in there. So I used the bandsaw and just kind of gave it a free-form shape. I wouldn't really call it rustic, but maybe vintage. Yeah, that's probably a better way to describe it. Once I had the shape I was looking for, I used the freestanding belt sander to give it a much smoother look, because the bandsaw kind of gives those rough edges, and this thing I wanted it to look naturally worn down. So this worked out really well. Then I used our 45 degree chamfer bit to just go around and take off the sharp edge. I have a bad habit of spraying too close to my sign or my board or whatever I'm doing. Now, it was a little windy, so I kind of had to do that, but it still is something that I struggle with on a pretty regular basis. You don't need to be that close, and when you are, it's really easy to overspray. So you want to try to stay maybe 10 or 12 inches away from your board as you're spraying. Then we took our disc sander with the 80 grit disc and a random orbital with a 120 and sanded the whole thing off. I love the way this blue pine looks when you put a clear coat on it. The streaks in there just kind of pop a little bit more, gives it a little more contrast. This stuff is a lot of fun to carve.
So there it is, guys. So I gotta say, I'm pretty happy with how this thing came out. When I was drawing and cutting the edge like that, I wasn't too sure, but now that it's all finished, I really like it. So as always, guys, we will leave links in the description below for all the stuff we used today, including our Gone Hunting stencil. If you have any questions, you can shoot me an email, ryan@makeawoodsign.com, and I'm happy to help. All right, guys, we'll see you on the next one. Bye.